What's up, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with Tesla SPY, Nvidia, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. And break down what the news is saying about Tesla moving forward. Talk about the PCE data report that just came out and what data is also coming out at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then break down how all of this could affect Tesla stock. But let me just mention that I am not a financial planner. Make sure you take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. Deposit $1,000, you're guaranteed 15 in total, and the offer ends in just 5 days. Anyways, for Tesla right now, we ended up gapping up, especially as we just got the PCE data reports. But the data was kind of like it was aligned with expectations, but a little mixed at the same time. So core PCE was at 0.2%, a little bit above the expectation of 0.1%, but not bad whatsoever. PCE month over month for all items was at 0.1%, aligned with expectations. And then PCE year over year for all items was at 2.5%, aligned with expectations. And then core PCE year over year was at 2.6%. It was aligned with expectations technically, but a little bit on the higher end of that at 2.6%. So now we're just waiting for the Michigan consumer sentiment data, the 5-year inflationary expectations report and such at 10 o'clock a.m., 30 minutes after the market opens. That might also cause some volatility. Now, there's also some news coming out that a robotics firm out there is actually talking about how it's wanted Tesla to help actually improve its AI, to work on its Optimus robot and things like that. So there's been a lot of talk about this, even like in the modern day. It's something that's worth noting, but I haven't seen Tesla respond to this. There's also news right over here about how Tesla will discuss investing $5 billion in his private AI company. This is also some interesting news. This is going to be very useful for kind of developing different sectors of AI, such as AGI. That's something that Musk has been talking about. But in essence, they're essentially working together to help improve not only this, but to use this for the benefit of Tesla and also their AI developments. So something that's worth noting, he actually had a poll that came out on Twitter asking if Tesla should invest $5 billion into XAI, assuming the valuation is set by several credible outside investors. So right now, it looks like the majority of people seem to be in favor of this. We'll see what the board ends up saying about this. This is going to be very important. On top of all this, I just want to mention the market has, it kind of pumped and dumped yesterday. So we watch to see how we end up holding up today. And also, the US economy had some good GDP numbers, despite that the market still popped and then dropped. And we're still going to be looking for interesting volatility. Don't forget that for SPY or SPY, we have quite a few options expiring. Right over here, you guys can see that we have an interesting option chain with about 430,000 calls, not to mention over 800,000 puts expiring with 547 being our max pains. We'll just have to see how things go. Anyways, for Tesla, I just want to mention that this is what our setup looks like. In my personal opinion, we're going to be looking at support around 222. That's going to be our 20 EMA. If this fails, we'll be dipping all the way down to fill this gap towards 220. And to be bullish, you want to break past 225. My prediction yesterday was that Tesla would retest 225 and we see what kind of reaction we get. We did technically do that during the pre-market, but even though PCE came out, we haven't been able to break this. So wait for the first 30 minutes just to see what kind of reaction we get. I do think there's a risk of Tesla tipping just a little bit to fill this gap, and we'll have to see if we could hold 219 or not. If you reject and fail to hold 219, this could be a double top, so you want to be very careful. We need to hold 219. If this breaks, there's going to be a risk of us dipping all the way back down to these lows. So you want to be very careful with Tesla. We'll see if this is a double top. I do think it might dip a little bit to fill this gap, and then we'll have to see what kind of reaction we get later on. It's about this 219 area. So watch for Tesla moving forward. There might be a little dip coming. We did gap up and then possibly dip. This is what I did call out yesterday, how we could end up retesting 225. That's what happened during the pre-market. I do think Tesla may dip a bit to fill this gap, and we'll see if we get a bounce or not. For Bitcoin is trying to uptrend right over here. There was a head and shoulders like structure, but it hasn't really played out quite yet. We're technically still at the potential right shoulder area, but it's not too bad. We'll be watching 67,500 to be tested on Bitcoin. Might push a little bit more, and we'll see if you reject off this or not. If you do reject, look for 16,600. If you do break through this, we'll be looking for a test of these highs. So watch and see if Bitcoin can break past 67,500 or not. That's going to be a very, very key level. For Nvidia, we're rebounding right now during the pre-market session. Make sure you look at resistance very close to this 116 area. If Nvidia manages to break through this, I'll be looking for 118 all over again, then eventually 121. There's a possible inverse tension lows like structures is looking pretty good. But we need to hold above 114.5 just for confirmation. If we lose 114.5, we could come back down to fill the gap down to 112. So just be careful. As of right now, we're testing resistance at 116. So we'll see if this breaks or not. I see potential for this to break. We're watching to see if we get a rejection. We still have this gap below, so we'll just have to see how things look. But with this inverse tension like structure, there is upside potential for this, especially if we break past 118. Nvidia is showing some love compared to the market. For SPY, I'm a little concerned about this because this isn't looking that great. We have this high right here, and we're actually continuing to make lower highs and lower lows. And if we don't break past 548, this could be a rejection that's coming back down to fill this gap, and we could even dip potentially lower. So be careful with SPY. I want to see this break past 545 or 200 or 50 EMA, and eventually 248. 548. Excuse me, guys. 548 to turn back to bullish. If we fail to do so, we end up losing 542. I do see a risk of us dipping all the way down to 539 all over again. There's still weakness in this chart. It's still continuing to downtrend. We did gap up with the PCE data report, but we're still struggling to break out. And it does look like it's turning a little bit here. So I'm a little concerned it might come back down to fill this gap. We'll see what kind of reaction we get. There might be a little dip coming, but watch and see. If we break past 545, watch 548. If we break that, we turn bullish. If we fail to break 548 and we establish a lower high here and we end up losing 542, there's going to be a risk of us coming down to fill this gap. So watch your levels carefully. I do see a risk of some downside, especially considering the fact that ES is at resistance at the 50 EMA and possibly rejecting. If it loses 54.74, look for a little rug pull. Be careful with ES. And then for SPX, we're continuing to decline. We still have this gap to fill. We haven't fully filled this gap, so that's what makes me a little bit apprehensive, and this could lead to more downside on SPY. For the QQQ, just like SPY has a very similar setup. We need to break past 464 to turn back up and eventually 468. Look at those two resistance areas. If we fail to break through the resistance areas that I just called out, there's going to be a risk of downside. If we fail to hold around the 460 area, 461, if that breaks, we could easily drop all the way down to fill this gap to the 458. So just be careful. There is going to be a risk of some downside for the triple Q. This could be a lower high that's being established in the dip. So just be careful. We have a bearish divergence on the smaller time frames. Be very, very mindful of that. So I do see a risk of downside, but just to be safe, watch and see if we end up losing 461. For Apple, we push back up to 220 as we predicted, but there's also this gap to fill. So we might be making a move back down to 218 all over again. Even if we do come down a little bit, there's still a possible inverse head and shoulders like setup. So this could dip a little bit and then try to bounce. So we'll just have to wait and see if that ends up being the case. But I do see a small dip coming for a possible bounce. For the IWM, we gapped up all the way up to 225, but we are coming down a little bit. There's still this gap to fill down here, so I'm a little concerned. It might retest 222. So there might be a little bit of a dip coming out even after the PCE data report. For Coinbase, same setup. We did go up to about 242. We did call it 240, but there's a gap to fill down here at 236. If we break past 245, we'll be watching this trend line. If that breaks, we could turn even more bullish. If it rejects here, I'll be looking for a dip back down to 235, so watch for that. For Amazon, same setup. We gapped up, but there's a gap to fill down here at 180. If that rejects, and we lose 180, I'll be looking for 178 and 175. Might be a rejection on Amazon. Meta has the same setup. There's a big gap to fill down here all the way down to 454. We need to break past 468 to turn bullish. Otherwise, there's a risk of us coming down to fill the gap. Microsoft has a similar setup. It's still very weak. We're going to be looking at 418 as one of our supports. And if that fails, this 418 area, we'll be looking for a move all the way down to 415. Microsoft is still kind of weak. So is Google. We basically have this support down here around 168. If that fails us, I'll be looking for 165. Market is still showing signs of bearish momentum. If we break key resistance levels, we could try to bounce, but there's no sign of that yet. And I do have concerns that some of our favorite stocks may end up tipping a little bit for now. But whether or not that happens also depends on the Michigan consumer sentiment data coming out at 10 o'clock a.m. So wait for some more volatility 30 minutes after the market ends up opening, and we'll see how things go. Thank you for listening, and peace out.